The movie kicks off with a hijacked plane ready to land at an airbase. The military's already on high alert, ready to handle business. As the plane touches down, a sniper takes aim at the cockpit and spots a guy in civilian clothes, looking all sorts of injured and sketchy. Army Chief Alan Drummond gets the lowdown that there's only one guy in the cockpit, which means the pilots are probably killed. Alan gets on the radio, doing his best "come out with your hands up" routine, and tells the dude to open the plane door and let the passengers go. The guy, who we'll call Mr. Mystery for now, insists he's not a terrorist, but a victim hiding from something way scarier in the passenger area. Alan's not buying it and keeps pushing for that door to open. Mr. Mystery, looking like he's been through a blender, tries to show his scars and injuries, but Alan's having none of it. Then, out of nowhere, a kid jumps out of the plane while clutching a teddy bear like it's a life raft. The army guys rush over, scoop him up, and haul him to the base. The kid, Elias, is in such deep shock that he might as well be a statue. The doctor tries to get him to talk, but Elias isn't spilling the beans. Which makes sense since he's just witnessed some major nightmare fuel. But what exactly happened? I will tell you guys, but make sure to hit that subscribe button now for more recaps like this. Back to our story. We are taken into a flashback to a day ago, and we see Elias all happy and normal, getting ready to fly from Germany to America with his mom, Nadja, who's battling leukemia. They're at the airport, and Nadja's looking rough as she is in the restroom injecting herself with something. She's wearing sunglasses and covering up, like she's allergic to sunlight. Elias, meanwhile, is making friends with a fellow passenger, Farid, who's got the friendly guy thing down pat. Farid is, by the way, Mr. Mystery. But when Nadja arrives, she whisks Elias away without even a nod to Farid. Poor guy, he didn't even get a thank you. The plane takes off and Nadja's jittering in her seat like she's had too much coffee. She injects herself with that thing again and jots it down in her diary. She drifts into a memory of happier times with her husband and Elias. When Elias was a toddler, they were out on a picnic, and while returning, their car broke down. Nadja's husband leaves to get a mechanic, but before we can get a bit more about her past, a loud commotion snaps her back to reality. It turns out that one of the flight attendants is a terrorist in disguise. As passengers start to panic, more terrorists whip out their weapons. The co-pilot, Bastian, is revealed to be a part of the gang too. They take down the sky marshals and mess with the black box, so the plane disappears from radar. Their ringleader lays down the law, telling everyone to sit tight while they wait for a ransom. As the passengers are freaking out, little Elias decides to keep his cool and look for a way out. He flips through the aviation directory, like a mini MacGyver, and spots the cargo area as a potential hideout. Without saying a word to his mom, he makes a break for it. Nadja, understandably confused and worried, chases after him. But uh-oh, one of the hijackers, a real nutjob named 8-Ball, sees them, and without a second thought, shoots Nadja. Elias is dragged back to the passenger area, and he is feeling like his world has just been shattered into a million pieces. Farid tries to comfort him, but Elias is too broken up to respond. Now you'd think that's the end for Nadja, right? Wrong. Miraculously, she's still alive despite taking multiple bullets. We're back to the night Elias's dad went to look for a mechanic. Hours pass and he doesn't come back, worrying Nadja. She decides to search for him, and on her way she finds a trail of blood, following which she reaches an abandoned house in the woods. Inside, she's attacked by a vampire, because why not add vampires to the mix? With toddler Elias in tow, she fights for her life and knocks herself into a room, only to find her husband's lifeless, vampire-mangled body. If that wasn't scary enough, the vampire comes back, this time trying to enter from the ventilation area. Nadja does all she can to keep the vampire out. Luckily, the sun rises, and as we all know, vampires hate sunlight. The vampire turns to toast, but not before biting Nadja. And now things make sense. We can understand why she's allergic to sunlight and still kicking after being shot. Nadja's a vampire in disguise. Now on the plane, Nadja wakes up and drags herself into the cargo area. Desperate for blood to regain her strength, she finds a dog, sorry dog lovers, and makes it her dinner. Meanwhile, in the passenger area, the terrorists force Farid and others to send a message to the authorities, announcing the hijacking. After the head honcho offs a guy to show he means business, Farid and the rest have no choice but to comply. The leader then orders 2 terrorists to head to the cargo area and prepare the bombs. One of them notices the dog's gone, and there's a whole lot of blood on the floor. But before he can react, Nadja pounces and takes him out. She starts to transform into her vampire form, but decides to inject herself to stay in control. until she learns about the bombs. With the plane and her son's life on the line, Nadja chooses to unleash her vampire powers. She drinks the terrorist's blood to regain strength, because blood is like Red Bull for vampires. Back in the passenger area, the hijackers threaten to kill everyone if anyone moves. Then they all head to get ready to jump off the plane before exploding it. As soon as they leave, Nadja swoops in to get Elias. Her sudden reappearance has everyone, including Fareed, suspicious. They warn her to sit on her seat, but she ignores their warnings and takes Elias to the cockpit, only to discover the plane is on autopilot. Nadja returns and asks if anyone knows how to fly a plane. An aviation student steps forward, nervously admitting that he has some knowledge. She takes him into the cockpit while the passengers are on edge, fearing that her actions might provoke the terrorists and get them all killed. But Fareed, our brave buddy, tells them that they're dead meat either way if they don't try something, as hinted in the terrorists' sinister message. Nadja quickly assesses the situation and realizes the hijackers are preparing to jump from the plane, making it clear they just intend to crash it. She instructs the student pilot to keep the autopilot engaged until the hijackers bail out, to prevent any further chaos. Meanwhile, Nadja's transformation into a full-fledged vampire continues. Thanks to that double dose of Red Bull, blood, she had in the luggage area. Elias and the student pilot are freaking out, but Nadja stays focused. Soon, 8-Ball, the unhinged hijacker, notices Nadja's body is missing. He realizes she is alive and storms back into the cockpit with other terrorists, including their leader. They threaten to kill a passenger unless Nadja opens the door. They even kill one poor soul and then take a young girl as hostage, causing Nadja to comply. But then she launches a swift, brutal attack on the terrorist leader and starts drinking his blood to power up. She realizes he's turning into a vampire, so she mercilessly stabs him, ending his life. The other hijackers are horrified and flee, but young Elias watches his mom with a mix of awe and fear, seeing her as a kind of dark superhero. 8-Ball begins doubting that Nadja is a vampire. He rummages through her bag and finds her diary, confirming his suspicions. He announces to the other hijackers that UV light, like sunlight, can kill her. Meanwhile, Nadja goes into a bathroom and gets herself injected with that serum to regain control. We flash back to just after she was bitten. Nadja, struggling with her new vampire instincts, often loses her temper around toddler Elias. Desperate, she returns to the house where she was bitten, seeking a cure. There she meets an old woman who reveals that the vampire who bit her was his son. She tries to kill her, saying he can't let vampires roam free. But Nadja, in a desperate fight for survival, kills him. His dying words haunt her. Kill yourself before you kill others. Back in the present, Elias leaves the cockpit to find his mother passed out in the bathroom. He tries to drag her back, but 8-Ball and his men arrive. The student pilot, seeing the danger, locks the cockpit door, leaving Nadja and Elias outside. Nadja regains consciousness and musters her remaining strength to confront 8-Ball. 8-Ball, armed with a UV flashlight, steps forward with a sinister grin. He manages to overpower Nadja and draw her blood with a syringe. He's about to finish her off when Elias, the brave little guy, grabs a gun and points it at 8-Ball. 8-Ball mocks him, saying kids like him don't have the guts to shoot. But in the chaos, Elias accidentally pulls the trigger, and the bullet hits a plane window, causing rapid decompression. Cue the scramble for oxygen masks by everyone on board. Nadja, breathing just fine, vampire perks, quickly takes Elias to a seat and gives him a mask. Later, she tries to shoot 8-Ball, realizing he'll misuse her blood, but misses. 8-Ball flees to the luggage area. Nadja hands Elias to Fareed and rushes after 8-Ball. Meanwhile, 2 hijackers enter the cockpit to lower the plane's altitude to stabilize the pressure. Sadly, the aviation student in the cockpit is already dead, having missed grabbing an oxygen mask in time. This is what happens when you betray someone. Back to Nadja, she finds 8-Ball hiding in a bulletproof car. He injects himself with her blood despite her pleas and quickly transforms into a vampire. Before he can attack, she cleverly sets the car on fire. Believing she's dealt with him, Nadja heads back to the passenger area after extinguishing the fire. The other 2 hijackers, seeing the flames, rush to help 8-Ball and find him fully transformed. 8-Ball attacks one of them, drinking his blood, and then heads after Nadja. When Nadja enters the passenger area, some passengers try to kill her, and she retaliates. She even attacks Fareed, thinking he is also against her, but Elias stops her. Right then, she hears the ultrasonic screeches of other vampires and warns everyone to stay put while she rushes to close the door. 8-Ball and the other vampire, now turned by him, arrive. Fareed helps Nadja shut the door but gets bitten. A passenger manages to shoot 8-Ball before he can get in. Nadja, realizing Fareed will also become a vampire, severs his hand. Meanwhile, another vampire tries to enter from another side, but Nadja overpowers him. She then finds Bastian, the real co-pilot, and forces him to land at the nearest airport as soon as possible. Bastian contacts the nearest base, explaining they were hijacked by some hijackers earlier, but now they have overpowered them and only need permission for an emergency landing, which they get. Amidst the chaos, one of the injured passengers has an epiphany, or maybe it's delirium, and decides he wants to join the vampire club. He limps over to the trapped vampires and asks 8-Ball to bite him. But 8-Ball, always with his own agenda, brushes him off and sets his sights on Nadja, the main target in his twisted mind. Now all the vampires are free, and they swarm into the passenger area, sinking their fangs into anyone they can reach. Nadja realizes that if they land the plane in this state, the vampires will spread their curse all over the world. So she suggests a rather explosive solution, using the terrorist bomb to blow up the plane. In a heartbreaking moment, Nadja shares her love for Elias and reveals her plan to sacrifice herself along with the bomb since they lack a timer. Elias, understandably emotional, tries to argue against it, but Nadja insists it's the only way to save countless lives. Determined to spare his mom from such a fate, Elias sets off to find the hijacker's timer, equipped with a UV light to fend off the vampires. He manages to get a timer, but in the chaos, he drops his flashlight, and the vampires close in. Nadja takes matters into her own hands. She instructs Bastian to set the plane on autopilot for a nearby airport and then turns to Fareed, requesting that he look after Elias as a father would if anything happened to her. Fareed, ever the stand-up guy, agrees without hesitation. Then, with a sudden burst of power, Nadja attacks Bastian, feeding on his blood to fuel her transformation into her vampire form. She exits the cockpit and faces off against 8-Ball to protect her son. Despite 8-Ball sinking his fangs into her, Nadja manages to hurl him out of the plane when Elias explodes the emergency door. But 8-Ball, proving to be quite the stubborn one, grabs onto the plane for dear life. Seeing this, Fareed takes matters into his own hands, turning the plane toward the glaring sunlight, causing 8-Ball to sizzle like a vampire barbecue. Nadja's in a dire state now, weakened and unable to move. She's desperate for fresh blood to regain some strength. Elias, being the caring son he is, tries to offer his own blood, but she refuses, knowing she's a danger to him in her current state, and decides to keep her distance from Elias. Back in the present, Elias, still reeling from the trauma, sits in front of the doctors. After a while of silence, he manages to speak up, stressing the importance of letting Fareed off the plane. Alan thinks Fareed has somehow coerced Elias into saying this, so he tries to calm him down and orders a doctor to take him to a hospital. But Elias is adamant that they need to let Fareed go before sunset, or the vampires will get him. Meanwhile, the army's in a heated conversation with Fareed, not buying his protests of innocence. Fareed, realizing he's got no other choice, decides to sacrifice himself and blow up the plane to stop the vampires from spreading. But before he can act, the army shoots him, and Elias, hearing the commotion, knows he has to act fast. Using his quick thinking and some sedatives, Elias knocks out a doctor and races back to the plane to stop the army from going in the plane. But he's too late. The army has already stormed in. Though they manage to rescue Fareed, many soldiers lose their lives to the vampires, and things go from bad to worse when the plane door is left wide open. The vampires start coming out, and Alan finally realizes that Fareed and Elias were right. Elias spots his mom, now completely lost to her vampiric instincts, and calls her out in anguish. But Nadja, consumed by her thirst, goes after him. With no other choice, Elias pulls out the timer he's been hiding for so long and presses the trigger, blowing up the plane and taking out the vampires, including his own mom. In the aftermath, Elias is left alone, feeling like his whole world just went up in flames. But then, the injured Fareed comes over, holds him in his arms, and promises they'll get through this together. And with that, the movie comes to an end.